What is your biggest personal takeaway from this experience?
My biggest personal takeaway from this experience is the understanding I have gained about gay culture and the many ways in which this epidemic plagued a society and the ways in which it went unnoticed.
What is your biggest takeaway from this experience?
I think it's the fact that I've had to push myself so much, and I can't rely on things I've used in the past. And I really had to push myself because it's such a hard show and such a difficult subject matter that we're dealing with. So being honest and truthful to these people and this story is essential, and that was a big push for me. And I'm glad and humbled that I got to do this show.
Why is this story important to tell now?
There's still no cure. There's treatment in place to help AIDS victims, but there still is no cure. So what these men fought for is still very much alive today. So their story deserves to be told, so we continue to do the best we can to help those who have fallen ill to this disease.
Why is this story important to tell now?
The story is important to tell now because they weren't told then, and they're barely told now. In classes, we don't hear about LGBTQIA history. We don't learn about these men's stories and these women's stories, and now finally we have a truthful and poignant play to share those stories.
What is your biggest personal takeaway from this experience?
A common theme throughout the play is trying to decipher who's right and who thinks they're right versus the right thing to do. And it's made me think a lot about looking at situations from different perspectives and seeing the big picture of very hostile and dangerous situations, and how what you say to the public and what you choose to exert, how you choose to exert yourself and the others you surround yourself with creates a domino effect on the impact that others see you. So I would say my biggest takeaway would be keep in mind the perspective of others within your close-knit group, but also remember that even though you may think that what you're doing is the right thing to do, not everyone will always think that.
Why is this story important to tell now?
I think this story is important to tell now so that people can be educated on the things that people in this country have gone through. I know that me being cast in the project, I didn't even know that there was an AIDS crisis in America before. I never knew that. We never touched on it in class. So I think it's important to educate people on what happened in history.
What has been your biggest personal takeaway from this experience?
My biggest personal takeaway is probably the idea that just because you don't know about something doesn't mean that it is not going on. What I mean by that is that before this process, of course I knew about AIDS and I knew a very small bit about the fight for recognition in terms of support for AIDS, but I didn't know to what extent these struggles took place and how big this battle was. And so for me, it kind of just opened my eyes into just where it's there are things going on constantly around the world across the span of time that are very cataclysmic and have such a huge impact on the world as a whole. But oftentimes as humans, we are stuck in our own minds too much to kind of really zoom out and really look at that big idea and realize that there's a lot of stuff going on.
What is your biggest personal takeaway from this show?
My biggest personal takeaway from the show is definitely after doing about 4 hours of dramaturgy, we learned a lot that I did not learn from school. Like how Ronald Reagan wouldn't consider it an epidemic because he wanted to get rid of the gay population, which is the T, which is crazy, first off. It just goes to show how an important movement like this and how long it takes and the millions of people that die to finally have to prove that it is an epidemic and that it is a problem that needs to be taken care of, in a sense that like we need to find a cure. And I feel like we're getting closer every day to find a solution, but it shouldn't have took the millions of people dying to get to where we are today.
Why is it important to do this play now?
I think it's important to do the normal heart now because, first of all, the disease itself is only about 40 years old. So just by that, it affects people that are alive today. Pretty much it affects everyone in some way, whether yourself are carrying this disease or you have a loved one who is affected by this disease. And also I think there is a huge stigma around the AIDS community. When the disease first came on the scene back in the early 80s, late 70s, there were stigmas that like you couldn't touch someone with AIDS, or you couldn't even come into the same room as someone with AIDS because you would catch it or something like that. And those stigmas have kind of died out, but there's still a huge discrimination against people who are carrying this disease. Most of them now in our generation were born with it, just passed down hereditarily. So yeah, I think it serves as a warning to people for the future.